let's make a start. I want to put a bit of context around what we're doing today, really. So we all lived in a world where we could all get up in the morning and go to the office, and myself personally, obviously, travel around the country and go to other people's offices and see customers. And then one day, literally all that got took away from us. So all our lights got turned off and we all started to work from home. But if anyone like me, as a business leader, as a manager, we all took a step back and kind of went, oof, okay, how do I get all my staff to work from home? So we went through a bit of a checklist. What do we have in the office that people probably need from home? So there's a number of things that are coming up there, connectivity being one, antivirus, security, access, virtual private networks, access to Microsoft Office, access to Teams. Some organizations didn't even have Teams at the start of the pandemic, and we were looking at WebEx and some people using Zoom and different technologies. So we went through the checklist, and what a number of customers did and a number of organizations did, and if you did this, you're not on your own, we put quick fixes in place, which were nothing more than sticky plasters, really. They were quick, easy solutions to solve a problem, but not sustainable long term. So the key of today is to answer some questions, really. How do I connect to my network and services securely from a remote location, you know, from my home? How do we keep our data safe? How do I collaborate with colleagues and customers? And ultimately, something non-techie, non-IT, but how do we keep staff motivated? Because I'm sure we're all have a challenge with that one as well. So how do we keep the network? How do we access the network securely? So in the first instance, I just wanted to highlight what ideally we should all be looking for. And press the right button here, you should all see. So we've obviously got our remote workers, and those remote workers working from home or any location, connecting into the head office, maybe remote locations, remote offices, and cloud services. So we assume in this case that all users have access to the internet one way or another. Again, I personally have to use a 4G line because my broadband connection is atrocious. So I'm hoping this is all working very well for you. So before we get into nitty gritty, what I want to do is trying to introduce the firewall. Again, this isn't technical at all, but I think it's important that everybody understands what a firewall is before I move on to the next step. So when I Googled firewall, this is what I got, and I'm sure this is what comes into people's minds. That is not a firewall, that is a picture of a wall on fire. That is a firewall, and actually may look like or similar to a device that you've got in your home. Some routers that you will get with service providers do have limited firewall functionality, but ultimately, the role of a firewall is track and control data. It decides who can enter your network and when. Enforces security policies, protects your network from unwanted access. And as I said before, some routers do have basic firewalls built in. We do find that from a budget perspective, some of the remote offices may have routers with low-end firewall capability, but not necessarily the security required to keep that site safe. So you probably do want to review your firewall in terms of your remote sites and just make sure they are secure. One thing that does get overlooked with the firewall, especially in these times, is when you are increasing your data throughput, so your internet connection, we've got people accessing the office remotely, and that number of users increases, therefore you need more broadband speed. Your firewall could be a limitation there because ultimately you're putting more through it, and if it's only designed to work on a 10 meg line, for instance, and you put a 100 meg line in, you need to basically replace your firewall, or it will start to slow your business down. And ultimately, more users via VPN, for instance, a bigger firewall will need to take on that load. So very, very quick introduction to firewalls. I'm not going into any more than that because, again, this isn't a technical session. So one of the sticky plasters I was talking about at the start is Windows RDP. And I don't know if anyone's actually turned this on or not, but if you Google Windows RDP, there are link after link on how to secure an RDP connection. And this is because the ports that it use are standard ports, standard network ports, so basically an address that everyone's aware of, and therefore it's well known to hackers. So if they get onto your network and they find this port, ultimately your device is at risk. So if you have enabled the RDP access and not done any firewall rules or routing, then can I suggest that either you do that or you strip out RDP altogether and use some other method of accessing that device. That other method could be through your firewall as a VPN tunnel, so a client installed on the local machine. You click that and it creates a private connection through your firewall onto the server or the PC that you need access to. Obviously, there's other more expensive options, which is remote desktop services. Again, if anyone's used Citrix or an RDS session, it basically creates a virtual machine, for want of a better word, on your laptop that enables you to access your files and folders. Or ultimately, if you can, maybe move that software off premise into a hoster or a cloud-ready solution that will already have access and security in place to enable your users to connect to that application and services. So how do we keep our data safe? So the user's got access to the network. How do we protect the data on that local laptop or PC? Exhaustive list, but this isn't going to be an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to highlight some of the most popular challenges people are having and what to look out for. So the number one risk on anyone's network is the user, human error. We've taken people away from their secure bubble, away from their office surroundings by their colleagues, IT support on premise, and they're now in the big bad world, open to manipulation by the cyber criminal. So it's our responsibility as a business to educate staff. And as you can see here, a report from Intel states that 97% of people globally cannot identify a sophisticated attack. So what we need to do is actually arm our people with the right tools to protect themselves. If you're looking at the very frightening man with the long hair, it's because he's the main character in one of Minecast cyber security training tools. So yeah, if you ever do that, you will see him. So at K3, I mentioned there, we actually partner with Minecast for this service. So I and members of my team and the rest of the organization actually sit through a 3-minute video every month where we answer a simple question, and it is literally a question at the end of that 3-minute video, and it gives you a score. Now, there may be right or wrong, or there may actually be all right, but with a grade of value against that. And once you've done that, it actually feeds back into a central system, so you can then actually use business intelligence off the back of that to then push out the right level of training or reiterate that particular training or module to that team, that member of staff, etc. It will cover your standard data protection practices, but it'll also look at phishing attempts and any regulatory practices that are required. So HIPAA, for example, there are sessions specifically around those compliances. So in addition to the Minecast training, so you've educated, and again, I'm calling out Minecast, but there are other organizations out there. We as a business have pulled together a number of resources that are available to you now, completely free of charge. We just ask for your email address. So if you'd like to go to the website, which is k3msp.com/COVID-19, and at the bottom of the screen, there's a lot of information on there that will hopefully help you and educate you on how to keep your staff and your data safe. So we now have access to the network. We've trained the staff how to recognize cyber threats. So what's next? How do we actually access those applications? We're going over a network, through the firewall, or to a cloud service, and we're using username and passwords. So we're all aware of complex passwords. So it must contain numbers, letters, any characters, etc. And the longer, the better. I was reading at the weekend that 16 characters or more is recommended. And we're all aware of the 45-day expiry. So you should have a complex password of 16 characters or more, and reset that, every 45 minutes. And these rules are more important for your system administrators than they are your users. You'll be surprised how many sysadmins dictate these rules to users and don't actually use them themselves. However, we're all aware that as soon as we start doing this, it gets really confusing, it gets overly complex for the users, and all you're going to get every day is a phone call going, I can't remember my password, I can't remember my password. So how do we avoid that? So within K3, we use a password manager. We actually use LastPass. There's obviously multiple technologies here being shown. These are kind of the top 10 from Expert Insights. However, there are more, and you may be using them. Keychain is one on Mac. So if you run an entire estate just using Macs and iPhones, then your keychain will be the equivalent to this. Stored in the cloud, they'll recommend to some of the third parties, which are a little bit different than Keychain, will actually recommend different levels of complexity. If you're at a website, for instance, that can't accept 24 characters complex password, you can reduce it down to 10. You can remove numbers, you can remove characters, and some of them will even report and tell you if that password's been used before, so you can actually change it. So the beauty of using LastPass or the equivalent is it will now store your passwords for those websites, for those applications. It's cloud-based, there's plugins to browsers. So again, LastPass will work on the iPhone, it will work on a MacBook, in Safari, in Chrome, for instance. And I know 1Password is very, very similar to that. So the beauty of this is we've now got our 45 days reset. We know what our passwords are, but wouldn't it be nice not to keep resetting your passwords every 45 days, even using a password manager, because ultimately that could get a bit onerous to try and manage as well. So what do the experts recommend? Multi-factor authentication. Again, if you're not familiar with MFA, the concept is based around what you have and what you know. So ultimately you have a device and you know your password. So for example, a complex password that is stored in your password manager, you would go to, say you're logging into a PC or logging into a cloud service, you'll put your username and use your complex password. You hit go. The next step is, right, on my mobile phone, my Duo app is now telling me to authenticate. Hit the tick box and it lets me in. Now, the question we asked, what if my staff don't have mobile phones? Well, you can get hardware tokens, biometric hardware tokens. So you plug these into the USB port. It asks for you to obviously use your finger or thumb and authenticate that way. It then gives you access. The beauty of using MFA is the fact that if your password should get stolen, bear in mind it is extremely complex and it's encrypted and you've not shared it with anyone and it's not written down anywhere, they still cannot get access to your system without having authorization, therefore logged into the Duo application or stolen your phone and gotten into your phone. You cannot get to your application and your services without authorizing that second step. So very secure. So we've logged in, we've got access to our applications, we've used our MFA, we've authenticated. What do we do next? Well, I'm now using my laptop. I'm now presenting to you guys. Am I 100% sure that every file that comes into my network now or via email that's shared with me is safe? So we would have all used and hopefully are all using antivirus. Again, multiple technologies shown there, and there are way more. But what I want to try and highlight here is that not all antiviruses are the same. Yours might be working fine now, and ultimately it's done well in the past, but they are not all the same. They have evolved to become more complex over the years to try and keep up with the evolving threats. So we all remember the original antivirus that's still very popular today, but it's generally down to the cost per client per device, more than its functionality really. And the old school, as I'll call it, antivirus was always kept up to date with virus definitions. Although effective, they cannot protect against a threat that it's not seen before, and therefore we or the vendor has not told it about, and this is known as a zero-day threat. So what do you do about that then? Well, the next technology, and again this is still available, is a cloud-based service. So it's basically a traditional antivirus client that is now backed up and sends data to the cloud, that may be running some artificial intelligence, bit of machine learning, that recognizes what that virus is doing to your machine, and ultimately tries and stops it from attacking the machine by not opening the file or telling you there's a virus and removing it at that point. However, again, these are not 100% and can get bypassed by the cyber attack. So what happens if you've been ransomwared and your files have started to be encrypted? So historically, you've had the option of paying a fine, which obviously is not recommended, because you may not get your data back. They just take the money and run. Or if you do have a backup, restore from the backup. Now that's if the people attempting the ransomware attack, have not been on your network for weeks and have not removed the files from the backup server. And this happens, they are logged in as administrators. They will go and remove all files from your backup and will sit there. If you are a large enough organization, will sit there and wait for your backup cycle to start. So whether that's 30 days, a week, wait for it to restart, initiate the attack, and then you've nothing to roll back to because ultimately you've lost your 30 days. So the new kid on the block from an AV perspective is endpoint detection and response, so EDR as an acronym. And this basically combines the cloud-ready, cloud antivirus with machine learning and AI on your local machine as well as the cloud, but also uses sandboxing and snapshotting technologically locally with the machine as well. So if you get ransomware and your files start to get encrypted, it recognizes the attack and then can actually rewind the encryption on the files and folders, and basically get you back to business as usual in record time. So again, this is a technology we use within K3. It's technology we resell at K3 Managed Services. So if it is something you are looking at or looking to improve your AV, your protection against ransomware, please reach out and we can discuss further. So we've covered antivirus. So that's your files coming to your folder, put via email, via shared drives, or maybe USB sticks if we still use those. I haven't used one for a long time, but I know people still do. What about email? So if you look at email, we're using data again from Minecast here. They see over 116 million attacks a month. Now that's one vendor. So imagine if you kind of multiply that across all the vendors, it's ultimately several hundreds of millions, if not billions of attacks a month. And as you would expect, most recently retail and wholesale have seen an increase in attacks. We're shopping more online now, so the end user is getting more ransomware or threats via email. Manufacturing, second most targeted sector, which is very interesting. But we think this is through to again the pandemic, more people working from home, and ultimately some of them manufacturers responding as a critical partner. Excuse me. So, how can I help with email? Most of you will be using email filtering right now, or at least I hope you are. And the most common use is to protect against email-borne viruses, spam and malware attacks. This is effective and cost efficient, but what about the other threats that are now coming through our emails to our users on a daily basis? Whaling attacks, for instance, people sending emails to senior member of the team, finance managers, for example, from the CEO for them to pay some money in someone's account, and this catches so many people out. Ultimately, malicious links, so links to websites, please sign in here, etc. So this is where a service like URL Protect can come in handy. So I'll cover off the malicious links here, and we can kind of cover off impersonation, but not in so much detail. It can get a bit too technical, really, the impersonation piece. But malicious links in URL Protect. So what is URL Protect? I've tried to give a visual representation as I feed through this, so I hope it translates. But this is an email I got in through from a vendor. It's TechTarget. I registered to TechTarget. Everything that comes from them, I assume is safe because I've gone, yeah, I trust this sender. However, this link, as you can see, obviously goes off to their website. But if you look at the URL that's being presented to me, it's actually a Minecast URL. So when I click that link, it doesn't take me direct to the website. What it's going to do is ask me if I think that link is safe. Now, this feeds into the cyber awareness training. So if I say it's harmful and it's not, it'll tell me. And if it's safe and it's not, it'll tell me. In this instance, I said it was safe and it's gone, well done, the link is safe. If it had told me that it wasn't safe, it wouldn't have taken me to the website for obvious reasons. And that would have actually then fed back into the Minecast cybersecurity training BI. So that would have then been alerted that actually I've done this training module, but I still probably need a reinforcement. And actually from an organization-wide perspective, it may be that we need to roll out a different video or a different message to tell the same or train the same. So this works hand in hand with web security. So you've got email coming in, you're clicking a link and it's safe. But because you're hitting a website, that website could be hacked at any time. It could be used at any time by cyber criminals. So when I click that link in maybe 2 weeks time, a month's time, because I've just saved it and I want to go back and review it, and that website has been attacked, ultimately Minecast will pick that up because it's checking the website every single time I click that link. So again, hand in hand with Minecast DNS and web security, if I just go to this is a client installed on a local machine, and if you're in the office, it can be, the gateway access can be applied, so you don't have to have clients, but it is recommended. And you also put clients on your remote PCs, people working from home. The web is used in 91% of malware attacks. And again, this is a report from Verizon Data Breach Investigation and from Cisco in 2018. It's also the top distraction for employees at work, and it's not hard to see why the web visibility and security is essential across a business. So web security protects against malicious web activities, blocks business inappropriate websites, and also helps mitigate shadow IT, therefore the risk of uncontrolled cloud app use. So shadow IT, again, if you've not heard of that terminology, it's basically where, I don't know, sales, HR, somebody else has gone out, they've downloaded an application from the web because they think it may help with their day job without actually reporting it to the IT team. Excuse me. So the web security will actually look at that application they're looking to download, that website, and help block that before it even touches your network. So again, if you combine this with the full Minecast suite from the email, security email archiving, and the cybersecurity training, you get a full holistic view of your entire organization, which can then feed back into the business, back into training, and again, keeps your data in your business safe. So moving on to data backup. Microsoft, for instance, has, I just wanted to kind of reiterate, sorry, before I move on to backup, that yes, I mentioned Minecast, but there are other technology vendors that can offer these solutions. And we still partner with Microsoft, for instance. So Microsoft has offerings as part of the Microsoft 365 suite, or part of an add-on or a bolt-on to the Microsoft 365 suite. What I would say is that having all your email, for example, stored in Microsoft on Exchange Online, being filtered by Microsoft technologies, then backed up by Microsoft technologies. I think you know where I'm going here. It's kind of all putting your data in one person's pocket, and which is fine for most, but it is a bit of a risk, because if Microsoft have any issues with their authentication platform, with their email platform, you could see a full outage of your organization on the basis that your email is there, your email continuity is there. So by moving this off site and putting it through third parties, you are reducing that risk of not being able to access your data should one vendor or one supplier have an issue at that point in time. So let's move on to backup. Moving away from the pretty pictures as such now. So Microsoft have what they call a shared responsibility model in terms of backing up of data, and more people now are obviously moving to Microsoft 365, because why wouldn't you? But again, with the shared responsibility, it's easy to assume that Microsoft will back up and look after all your data, and that it's going to be safe forever and a day, which actually isn't the case. So if you are going to use Microsoft 365 for Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., we'd always recommend backing those up using, again, it's cloud technology, third-party technologies, and again, it's something we can talk to you about. But it does basically move this data away from the Microsoft platform and into a third party's platform. Again, everything we discuss or I mention here is based in the UK as well, so we're not taking it off-site and out of Europe. We've all got GDPR regulations to uphold. So just bear in mind that when you are moving to Microsoft 365, that even if you tick that box that you want backup, Microsoft will provide that, but ultimately if they have a problem on their platform and for whatever reason that data is gone, they are not responsible for that. It is a shared responsibility. So I'd always recommend using a third party to move that back up out of that Microsoft ecosystem. But moving on to the client, so we back up, we're all very conscious of backing up our servers, whether that's people still use tapes, whether it's removable hard drives. As you get up to a larger scale organization for disaster recovery purposes, you're replicating offline or doing online backups and replication offsite to a secondary site or maybe into the cloud. But since we've now all gone mobile, or there's a large number of users mobile, and even more so a larger number of senior users going mobile that may actually have documents on their laptop that you've not seen as an IT individual or as a business owner. You're saving things locally because it's quicker. You're saving things in your documents folder. Some people don't understand how OneDrive works, so they're just saving it locally. And even though there's ways to enforce this from an administration perspective, you're still not 100% sure on whether you're truly backing up all your data. So what we'd suggest is potentially look at using a backup client. Now, it doesn't need to go across your entire estate. You may be very confident that one business unit is only ever going to use CRM, for instance, or ERP, or the finance system. But if there are people within the organization that carry critical data on their laptops, and you know that the potential there is going to be stored locally, do use a client backup. So the backup that we here at K3 can deliver is basically a simple client install. We can do it remotely or give you the ability to do it yourselves. Centrally managed, again, by ourselves or yourself. But it's a single charge per client. There are no data caps, data limits, or charge on data. And we give the end user the ability to restore those files back themselves. So this is low touch from an IT management perspective, if the user is competent enough to be able to restore those files. So again, it's keeping your data safe, whether that's locally on the machine, and ultimately stored in the cloud. So we've kind of done the protection bit now, and like I say, it's not an exhaustive list I've gone through. So there are a couple of things I'd just like to highlight there, is that if you're not encrypting your data on your local machine, so hopefully it's a business machine that your users have got and it's not a bring your own device, please use BitLocker or similar technology to encrypt the hard drive. So God forbid, the house gets broken into and the laptops get stolen, for instance, at least your data is then safe and you don't have to worry about the whole GDPR kickback on that device being safe and you not knowing what is stored on that data. So that's probably one thing I didn't mention throughout that presentation, but I think it is very, very critical that we do that. So collaboration. There's lots of tools around collaboration, and we don't have time on this to go through them all, and to be honest with you, I probably don't know them all, there's that many. But one that we are all very used to is probably right now using Zoom, using WebEx, as we are doing now. Teams is a product that we use heavily within K3 within the organization. So what I'm going to concentrate on today is more the Microsoft-based services, Microsoft 365, around collaboration. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. As we all know, Microsoft is prevalent within pretty much everyone's organization. I don't know the percentages, but it's going to be the high end, apart from those rebels that have gone off and probably implemented a bit of a Google environment. But you probably find that they're still using some bits of Microsoft somewhere. So Microsoft 365, combination of multiple services. And again, you may be using one or all of these. And you may not have even signed up to Microsoft 365. You may have just signed up to that particular application or that service as an individual application. But it's only when you really combine all of these, you feel the true value of the Microsoft 365 stack. Another advantage of using a Microsoft product is when we go back through the presentation that I've just run through, the integration with Microsoft Active Directory, Microsoft Windows Server, Microsoft, Windows 10, there's tighter integration around those technologies and management. So if you're running security policies, for instance, within Active Directory, that can then be fed through into the files folders, SharePoint, etc., on OneDrive. So for those that haven't seen Teams or not using Teams, and maybe those that are using Teams, you probably haven't had that much touch points with Teams. As the free version, Teams out of the box allows you to basically group chat and communicate using IP. So it's available on all devices, so iPad, iPhone, laptops, be that Apple or actually Google or obviously Microsoft. So communicating through chat, one-to-one or group chats, you can create specific organizations. So I don't know if you can see that on the left-hand side. See if I can do this. Oh. Yeah, so on the left-hand side there, you can actually create different teams, which then has a file structure that leads into a full chat and ultimately a timeline of conversations. And people can share files and folders within this within these chat windows, within these teams, and the owner can then actually set privacy levels or access levels within those teams as well. So again, you can share data across your entire organization, but only limit that access to certain individuals, i.e. read and write access. And again, as standard, you can make free IP calls using video chat if you wish, or not if you're not. I know a lot of people that are camera shy. However, in the free version, what you can't do, and again, I think this confuses a lot of people, in the free version, you cannot use Teams as a landline replacement. In order to do that, you need to be paying for one, Microsoft 365, but then add a call plan to that Microsoft 365 subscription. Once you add a call plan, it can ultimately replace your entire phone system. Now, caveat about that is if you're running a complex contact center, there are third-party contact center modules, etc., that you could use to integrate with Teams. As standard, its contact center piece isn't particularly great. It has an assistant, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, but it is not really a true contact center. You will need third-party plugins for that. But ultimately, yes, it can replace your landline. Again, K3 is 100% Teams. We don't run contact centers, we use service desks. So the auto assistant works quite well on the service desks. And you can get it to use geographical numbers. So again, if you're based in Manchester or you want it to call from a Manchester line and someone's based somewhere else, that's not a problem. And it'll also enable all users to receive the calls on their mobiles. So again, Teams application on your mobile, you can use Teams to dial within your organization or around or outside of that organization. But one of the big uses and advantages of using everything together, again, to increase productivity, is document collaboration. And again, I don't think a lot of people use this, but when you're storing your data in OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams is ultimately a very intelligent skin, but at the back end, all that data is stored within SharePoint. So again, you can always launch into SharePoint if you want to do a bit more detailed work on that file or folder, but it is all very manageable within Teams at a low level. But the beauty of it is you can all work on the same document. So as you could probably see here, highlighted in orange and then highlighted in green, that's 2 separate individuals working within a single document. So this is really useful if you're working on a tender, a large proposal, or a sales document or project management potentially. but combining document collaboration with messaging and phone and all that being brought together, it really enhances that productivity and the use and the value add of the Microsoft 365 stack. So I'm not going to read these out to everybody, and we will be able to share the slides in a PDF format afterwards, but there's some use cases for every scenario within an organization on why you should use Teams and the value that that brings. So we will share those, but as you can see there, it's quite complex, and hopefully some of you are scanning now and kind of seeing where it may help, but we will share these slides and they will be available. So bit of a change of pace. I'm coming towards the end of the technical stuff now, and on to the final question, which is all around how do I keep staff motivated. I've struggled with this one. I'm sure everyone else has. It's been a slightly different work of pace for everybody. So I thought I'd share some of the things I've picked up, heard about that's going on in around the world, and how people are getting a bit creative on what they're doing. So a key one for me was establish clear routines. I actually took on a couple of new members of staff literally a month or two before we went into lockdown. So they'd only just got into the routine of coming into the business. So it was very much, taught to them, get out of bed, have a shower in the morning, brush your hair, because a lot of people probably get out of bed and just sit in front of the machine and don't do anything. So it's not ideal not to follow that routine. Get ready as though you are leaving the house is kind of a key one, and hopefully everyone kind of understands that. Something I picked up the other day was take regular breaks. So people are spending more and more time in front of the machines. I used to go out on the road traveling in meetings, and now my meetings are on Teams and I hardly leave my chair. So it helps for people to take those breaks. So encourage water cooler chats, put a meeting in your team's diary. They don't have to attend it, but put it in the diary as, if you want to attend, get up, get a cup of coffee, log into the team meeting, and if anyone else is there, just have a chat, but don't chat about work, chat about something else. I guess it's going to be Netflix because there's not much else you can do these days, but just have a water cooler break. And ultimately, I know this isn't possible for everyone, but try and have your office space. Don't work at a kitchen table if you can help that. And again, I know that's a challenge. But some of the big ones: celebrate the success of others, and do it publicly if you can. Do it within the team, not just one-to-one. This will obviously increase morale. If somebody sees somebody else being praised for great work, then obviously that should trigger them to want to work harder and be more successful, and obviously mirror and get that praise. Social events. So we've been running, me and my team, the odd social events, not every week. Everyone else has got obviously family lives, but we've been running, put the usual pub quiz, virtual escape rooms, brilliant virtual escape rooms available online. They do need some modifying because they are designed to cut things out, but you can download PDFs, etc. Or some colleagues and friends of mine have been doing virtual gin tasting or wine tasting or cooking, but it's just something to get the team together. Don't necessarily have to after hours, maybe finish a little bit early on a Friday afternoon, maybe again, it'll just increase morale, and just get people talking and doing something outside of work. And then a bit of a serious one, people's mental state. I think we've all struggled with this, just trying to get our head in the game, and a lot of people are struggling. So again, K3, a brilliant employer, has a third party that if needed we can ring and speak to, and they will give us advice, etc. And again, I'd encourage any organisation to try and speak to your business if you don't already offer this to staff. Just some guidance. It is point your staff in the right direction. So I just want to reiterate as we start to wrap up is all the information and more so than what I've talked through here is available on our website. So please do visit that. If you want any more details, please do put a call into us, drop me an email. and we'll respond as soon as we can on that and help you move forward. And finally, if you haven't asked a question, or if you do ask questions, please do drop them in the chat now in the question box, and we'll come back to you as soon as possible. Alternatively, you can email the inquiries at or call us. And finally, we are giving away a 3-month trial of the documents backup that I mentioned, so the local client install. So it's a three months free trial, unlimited data, no restrictions. So if you do feel that it's something you want to look at for a handful of users, or maybe the entire business, please again do reach out and speak to us about that, and we'll move forward on that. So with that, we're just over the hour. I'd like to thank you once again for taking the time out of your day to join me, and hopefully I'll get to speak to you all again. So thank you very much.